Our guest this afternoon was born in Leith, either 51 or 58 years ago. We might get to the bottom of that. He's the son of a dock worker and a waitress. He left school at 16. His first novel was published in 1993, Trainspotting, and it was published to wide acclaim. Although that year it was deemed so offensive to two of the female judges on the Booker Prize that it was rejected from the shortlist. But by then it didn't matter anyway, because the film that followed became a worldwide smash and established him as one of the great leaders of the cultural vanguard. 8 novels have followed, countless works for the stage and screen. The latest of those is The Sex Lives of Siamese Twins, and it's every bit as ribald and twisted and fascinating as that title suggests. It does, for the first time, revolve around 2 female protagonists, Lucy and Lena, but it does carry the common themes of this man's work, which are sex, drugs, sodomy, republicanism, class warfare. Nothing about the tragedies and triumphs of the Scottish race this time around. I first crossed his path at this very festival 17 years ago. I went to a morning reading of his 3rd novel, Filth, and I was deeply impressed that he managed to have several elderly women hyperventilating and stretchered from the reading. I casually mentioned, as you do, great reading, we should grab a beer, and a couple of minutes later I was surprised to get a tap on the shoulder and a let's go. It was, after all, 10 a.m. in the morning. So we went where any AM drinker goes in Sydney, the Judgment Bar at Taylor Square, where we drank Bloody Marys and smoked spliffs out the window. And 9 hours of drinking and drug abuse later, I got Irvine to his Sydney Writers' Festival event half an hour early, actually, and actually went to the extent of breaking into the Sydney Town Hall to get him there. But while I left him to do a karaoke version of Goldfinger, which greeted the crowd, he later fell asleep on the stage while the other panellists spoke, and I answered questions across the road at the local cop shop. It's my turn to ask the questions today, so will you please make welcome, on our grand return after 17 years banned by this very festival, the one, the only, Mr. Irvine Welsh.
Thank you.
Welcome, Irvine. Have you been having fun at the Sydney Writers' Festival?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult not to have fun in Sydney, and especially at the Writers' Festival, which is just in such a beautiful location along the harbour. Everything's together, and yeah, fabulous.
Now, are you all picking up Irvine's accent all right? Because there'll be no subtitles or surtitles, so you'll just have to trust what he says. And there will be time for questions afterwards. We've got 15 minutes at the end, so fire up your own questions and keep them short and sharp, and try and phrase them as questions rather than statements. But let's talk about some of those voices, Irvine, because you're famous for sort of articulating and getting those phonetic voices down on the page. How is it playing ventriloquist to 2 women in your current book?
It's kind of not as difficult as you would expect, really. I mean, I kind of... It's, I think because I'm living in the States now and I'm kind of immersed with all this stuff that's going on around me, that, I kind of, you pick it up, you just get the kind of ear for it, and the ear for the rhythms of the speech. And also you've got, I've passed it to a lot of American women of that age and all that, and said, how is this sounding and all that. So, yeah, so you've got resources there, and people help you as a writer. People are quite happy to read manuscripts.
And you did a bit of research in the field as well, hanging out with bisexual women in the Miami club scene, I believe.
Yeah, I hung out with a lot of kind of young femme lesbians in the Miami club scene, and I became a bit of a fixture in the club scene. I didn't want to leave. At first I was incredibly intimidated, and then secondly, I just didn't want to leave. They couldn't get me out of those clubs.
Yeah. Now, Lucy and Lena they start as different characters, but they converge along the same lines, the parallel lines of the Siamese twins that are in the shadow play of this novel. But to what extent are Lucy and Lena, are they to any extent extensions of yourself?
Yeah, it's funny because, you think that, I think every character you write is in some way a part of you, we operate in this very kind of sort of narrow bandwidth that we decide is the sort of, the way we should behave. These are the kind of sets of traits that will kind of get us through the rest of the day or whatever. But we actually have, I think we have quite a wide range of behaviours that we're capable of, you know, so I think that one of the things about writing is that you can kind of go into these more extreme character traits that you wouldn't use in ordinary life, or hopefully you wouldn't use too much in ordinary life, unless you're really, really fucking drunk or stoned or whatever. You know, you can kind of get right into these kind of sort of mindsets, and they're all mindsets that everybody's capable of. But I kind of thought that because it's kind of two younger female American characters, that neither of them would be very much like me. But I gave it to the wife to read, and she says, these characters are more like you than any other characters you've ever written, which was kind of a bit disconcerting for me, I have to admit.
That's not to say you've got a strap-on on today, though, have you?
Did you notice? I thought these jeans were
method interviewing. Yeah. I mean, being inside the head of the heads of these characters, is that a hazardous process?
Yeah, I mean, what I've got better at is kind of, you know, sort of doing a session, you know, and writing it, you know, as quite an extreme character, and then coming back to kind of to my normality, basically. And I've basically got that from hanging out with actors, because they're very good at de-rolling, you know. An actor can do quite an intense performance. But James McAvoy in Filth is an example of that. I mean, he would go and do this incredibly intense sort of performance as Bruce Robertson, and then you think you're never going to see him until the shoot tomorrow. He's going to go up in his hotel room and disappear. But he was down half an hour later, you know, and back to being himself again. And over the years, I've kind of got more into that kind of side of it, about kind of giving yourself permission when you've done when you've written a very intense scene. Very much like actors do when they de-roll, just giving myself permission not to be that character. And it's very helpful to do that. You
often, I mean, once you've given birth to a character like Bruce or any of the Trainspotting gang, I mean, how responsible do you feel for them?
Oh, totally irresponsible all the time. Like, I always feel very, very irresponsible about everything. But particularly about, I think when you write a character and then it's, you know, if people embrace it, if they embrace the book or the movie or the stage play or whatever, it's no longer yours, really. You know, you've kind of created something, but it goes off on its own, has its own life.
Yeah, and you often, I mean, they do have a life of their own after you've written them, and you've returned to them quite often. You've returned to the Trainspotting guys. Bruce has popped up in a couple, you know. So how do you, I mean, how do they exist, you know, pre and post and being written onto the page?
Well, sometimes when you're writing a book, you know, you have an idea, a kind of thematic thing you want to explore, or a story you want to tell. And what happens is that you kind of think, well, what's the best way to tell the story? Who's the best kind of characters to tell the story? So it's a bit like looking in a toolbox. You know, the first thing you do is you see what's already there before you start to forge another kind of tool, really, you know. And I mean, in this new book, for example, I had to make a couple of new sort of characters up. I couldn't have just used previous characters to tell that particular story. Many times, you know, the characters will just gate crash their way back into a book. I mean, Sick Boy gate crashed his way into porno, which was never intended to be a Trainspotting sequel, but it became so because the character just kind of, I realised when I'd written the first draft of the book, this older guy that's with this younger woman is actually Sick Boy kind of 10 years on. So you know, when you do that, you kind of, then you have to tell the story of the other characters, and you have to find a space for them in the novel. Yeah.
So Trainspotting came out in '93. A couple of years ago, you did a Trainspotting prequel, Skag Boys, and you went back and sort of talked about how Renton, Sick Boy, Begbie, and Spud first became lost in the thrall of heroin. How was it, I mean, how easy was that to go back? Because I remember you telling me that it was basically the 50-year-old Irvine and the 20-year-old Irvine had to go back and converge and fight it out for the possession of these characters' souls.
Yeah, it was kind of strange because I did have a lot of material left over from, you know, earlier material left over from the Trainspotting era. And I wanted to write a story specifically about the 80s, about kind of, you know, because the 80s was a pivotal decade in Britain. It's like the politics and the political choices that we made as a society then in the 80s have kind of stayed with us and have kind of they've set us on this course that we're on now, and we've been on for the last 30-odd years. So it seemed to me to be the kind of decade of kind of change that defined the way the society is now. And I wanted to write about the 80s, and I thought that I was thinking about what is the 80s about. It was about deindustrialization, it was about the end of an employment economy, it was about the start of a drug underground economy. And I thought, well, these are the characters to tell it, you know. So I went back to my old stuff, and I liked a lot of the writing that was there. You know, I thought it was much more formed than I kind of thought it would be. I thought there would just be notes to try and get me into the characters to write Trainspotting. But there's a lot of stuff about the family that the families in the community that really interested me, and I thought I can build on this to do more of this. And but getting back, you know, because it was the first thing I'd written, which was kind of 20 odd years ago, and now it was here I am trying to get back into it. It was quite an interesting battle, you know, because you kind of you realise that your style has changed as a writer, and you become much more reflective. And I think kind of being older, you get a kind of wisdom looking back. But what you probably don't have, and what you kind of compromise, is a bit of that kind of that incredible kind of immediate vibe, that sort of, you know, that kind of fearless kind of banging in there. So I was trying to be very conscious of that when I was writing Skag Boys, and get that kind of balance between these two characters, between these two, you know, these two writers, basically, the younger self and the older self.
I think for probably a lot of the people here, you know, 93, reading that book, seeing the film, walking into party, and that soundtrack was on everywhere. I mean, tell us about who you were in those days. What was Trainspotting like an animal that leapt out of you, or was it a much more tactical decision?
It was a weird thing, because it was like, you know, I remember going back to Edinburgh, and I actually was living in Edinburgh when the book came out, and I've always moved from Edinburgh to London, and I kind of got back. I'd planned to move back down to London. And I was back down in London, and the book had sold something like, in the first few months, it had sold something like 1,000 copies. And when I came back to Edinburgh, I was like treated like this hero with this cognoscenti, like, you know, he's representing us, fucking good on him, that's our boy. You know? And then it sold 10,000 copies. Everybody's going, Then it was 100,000 copies. He's fucking sold us down the river, that bastard. He's fucking sold us out, that cunt. Take your... And 1 million copies, oh, for fuck's sake, don't go back to town again, like, you know. Yeah. But it's interesting that, you know, the book hadn't changed. It's the same book, but you can see how people feel about it, because, I mean, I felt that way about it myself. You know, it went from being my book to Danny's film, to Ewan's poster, to Richard Branson's train advert, basically, you know. And all the time it's kind of getting further away from, you know, the community that it's about, and the people that are kind of feel that they have a kind of emotional investment in it.
What have been the big changes in the 21 years for you? Obviously, I mean, let's talk about where the book began. I mean, it is a heroin story, a crack ballad about heroin. I mean, do you feel comfortable talking about your heroin years? Or?
Yeah, I mean, my heroin years are kind of, it's basically stupidity, really, because when I kind of dabbled with heroin, there was no kind of drug education sort of warnings. I mean, you know, I was just told, don't take drugs by everybody, you know, sort of parents, teachers and all that, and if you take drugs, you'll kill yourself, that's you're fucking dead, you're finished and all that. This is people that are drinking fucking kind of loads of, you know, whiskey and beer and all that, you know. And I thought, if I take this one puff on the joint, I'm dead. And somebody passes it around to you at a party and you're fucking shiting it, going, there you go. You know, and then it's the same, you know, so you think, they've cried wolf, so they'll be crying wolf for speed as well, you know, so you take some speed, and wow, this is fucking great. Drop some acid, like, wow, you know, look up, I'm still alive, like, you know. And then, you know, so they've cried wolf, so you don't believe them when heroin comes around, is introduced into the equation. And, you know, and it's that kind of, that thing about anybody, and I think the establishment and, the establishment's generally wrong, and your parents are generally wrong because it's a different cultural era that they're living in. But it's that old story that, you know, a broken clock is right twice a day, you know, and that's kind of very much what it is. You know, there's kind of it's a very, very kind of reductivist drug, and it does, you know, there's a buzz from it, but it will eventually drag you down very quickly.
does something of its DNA always remain in your system? I mean, do you have to replace one addiction? Have you found yourself replacing that addiction with another?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent my whole life replacing different compulsions. I mean, I prefer compulsive obsessive than addiction, because I think we make everything into addiction in consumer capitalism. We just have this idea that we have to have more all the time. I mean, the sex life of Siamese twins is basically, you know, it's like, it's about one of the characters has just put on weight. So the answer is, if you put on weight, just eat less. You know, just consume less. It's quite simple, really. Like, but we can't do this in our kind of paradigm. We have to consume more. We have to just consume different products. So we consume weight loss programs and diet pills and sort of all these different exercise kind of programs. We just have to keep buying and consuming. We can't get off that treadmill and just do less. So I think that everything becomes a kind of addiction. You know, we have Shoppers Anonymous, Sex Addicts Anonymous. You know, sort of as well as every kind of drug. You know, any kind. You know, like we have they've got a Gymorexics Anonymous now in Miami, which kind of was one of the things that set me off, kind of thinking about that this kind of book. But yeah, I mean, it's like we've created this kind of bizarre zoo for ourselves that we don't feel comfortable in. So this is the kind of the tragedy of humanity, basically.
Mm. Certainly, I don't think I would have ever thought that the Irvine of '93 would find the seed of an idea for a book in a gym while working out.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of strange, but I've always liked. I've never got this kind of dichotomy between sport and art. I think it's just one of these horrible things that we've done through this division of labour mentality to kind of alienate us from ourselves. Basically, I think that you become a well-rounded person. I think by being interested in things like sport and art. You know, you shouldn't be kind of pushed into this category of being the kind of sort of the dumb football kind of jock or the sort of kind of the artsy poncy nerd. You know, I think you should be able to be both.
Certainly, we both follow football teams associated with tragedy, though. I think you've won 2 games in 20, and I think Souths haven't won a premiership for 42 seasons. So let's talk about the character building experience that is following a losing team. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is tremendous. It is tremendous with character building, and it's like, but I think you get to that point where your expectations are so low. We were talking about this the other day there, that if they actually win a game, you start to get scared. Yeah. You know, start to get really, really terrified. You know, and it's like, I mean, they won the first leg 2-0 away from home of this playoff to stay in the top division. And now they've got the second leg tonight. And I'm absolutely shiting it, because before I wouldn't have cared if they hadn't won the second leg, but now my expectations have been tweaked. And they're just going to let me down again. I know they're going to let me down again.
All right. Well, let's stop talking about sport. Why don't we hear a reading? Now, initially I wanted Irvine to read from The Sex Lives of Siamese Twins, but being female protagonist, you're not comfortable with your falsetto just yet, are you, Irvine?
I'm not comfortable with my young American girl voice. I don't think you guys, I don't think visually it's going to play with you guys either, like, you know.
So instead we've got a world exclusive. I don't believe you've read from this before.
No, this is a new book that I'm going to have, well, it's a just finished book that I'm going to have out next year, and it's called A Decent Ride. And
you want to take the lectern, or you want?
Yeah, I'll stand up. It features a character called Juice Terry, who was one of the sort of the Glue protagonists, and he's a taxi driver. And I don't know if anybody remembers, in Scotland a few years back we had something called Hurricane Bobag, which kind of which really changed Scottish society in the same way that Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans changed kind of Louisiana and American society. You know, we still talk in Scotland about kind of the pre-Bobag and the post-Bobag era. It was so cataclysmic for our nation, like, you know. So the ramifications of Bobag are still being felt, by the way. So he's a taxi driver, and Bobag is about to make an appearance and devastate Edinburgh, where the damage will eventually run into hundreds of pounds. For this, which in Scotland is a fucking tragedy, I can assure you. Like, you know. So this is Juice Terry driving his taxi, and. He's not interested in picking up. He's not interested in picking up guys in the taxi. He's just interested in picking up women and dealing drugs. That's what he uses the taxi for. So, talk about fucking warning bells. It's pissing wet with 8 gales, and is this lassie walking down Queensferry Road, which is fucking deserted. She's heading towards the Forth Road Bridge. At this time, and in this fucking weather. A fair's a fair bit, eh? And besides, the jumpers are usually gadgies. Very seldom do you get Fanny try to top itself in that way. Aye, they sent us on a fucking course, so as we could spot the Harry Carey crew. They tell you all the things that you need to say to stop them, like counselling and that. Not that I ever fucking well bother. Cunt wants to jump, let them fucking well jump, eh? Fuck all that nanny state George Bernard Shaw's. Some cunts made their mind up about it. They must have good fucking reasons. It's not for the likes of a total stranger to say otherwise. Wouldn't it be me anyway, I'll tell you that. Jump off a cliff, and some bird phones you up the next day, deciding she's going to give you your whole after all. Nah, fuck that. Too much to live for me, but eh? Mind you, I can understand how some gadgets that aren't getting the ride would want to jump. Fuck that for a game of sodgers. But with a bird, it's different. Nobody in the right mind wants to see a good fanny going to waste. A bird's minge is meant to be hot for the rumpy-pumpy, no all cold, stretched out in a slab. Though there's some dirty cunts that would go for that, mind. I blame the fucking internet. Letting bairns watch extreme porn and they've not even had a fucking wank. That's would fuck any cunt see that. That's asking for trouble. Too right. I mean, I've made the odd scud flick, but it's I been consenting adults, no dodgy stuff. So I stops and the lassie gets in the cab. Her black hair's plastered to her head by the rain. Her long black coat's heavy with it, and her eyes are all fogged over. All right, doll, bit blustery night to be, eh? Never heard the ball bag. But this bird, she's just sitting there, staring off into space with eight dark eyes, probably brune, set in a roundish face. The lights are on, but there's no cunt home. The bridge, she says in this accent that's either posh Scottish or English. So, what's happening at the bridge then? She suddenly looks so offended, like it's none of my business. Didn't you look at us like that? I'm going. With that moosey face on. See if you jump off that bridge. It's my fucking case the police get on. I've got to ask these questions. Professional duty. She's looking right at us in wide-eyed horror, like these birds in the movies like Scream. But kind of no like Scream, because her moose gone all tight, like a fucking rumble dog. But that's up to you, I shrugs. It's your business. Just tell us if you are so that I can give the busy some story. Like you tell us you were going to your sister's in Inverkeithing, then says you were sick and you had to get out the car to puke, and the next thing you'd couch yourself out of the banister. That sort of shite. Just to cover my arse, but eh? She puts her head in her hands and mumbles something that I didn't catch, then jerks up and goes, I can get out here. No, I'll take you to the bridge. I shakes my head. Why, I see it. If you're determined to do it, you will. And it's kicking up fucking big time outside. You might as well go there in comfort. She doesn't even flinch at that. Tell you one thing, but puts her in the picture. You're not getting in this cab without paying your fare first. I wasn't. I've got money. She reaches into her purse. How much? I've got £70 and some change. Not being wide, I goes glancing in the mirror, but you might as well just hand it all over. If you're sure, likes. It would just be a wasted dosh, though, eh? Jumping with all that cheap money in your pockets. I'm not being wide, likes. The bird looks so angry. She's staring at us for the first time. Then she sort of shrugs and settles back in the seat. If I was ever in any doubt that this was the right time to leave this fucking place, you would have convinced me. And she reaches forward again and hands over the contents of the purse. I stops at the red light, turns and reaches through the Judas hole to take the puppy and crams it in my pocket. The road's empty, thank fuck. Look, I'm not being funny and I'm not trying to stop you gen up, but I've got to ask, what's a good-looking young lassie like you want to do this for? You wouldn't understand. She shakes her head. Nobody does. Well, explain it to us. I goes, because it says on that course, try and get them talking. What's your name? I'm Terry, by the way. I get Kent as Juice Terry because I worked in the juice lorries way back. Sometimes Scud Terry, because, well, I'll not bore you with the details. My name is Sarah Ann Lamont, she says, like she's a robot. I get called Sal, Sarah, Anne, Lamont. So you're from up here then, Sal? Yes, Portobello originally, but I've lived in London for years. Lamont, you said, aye? Yeah. Well, at least it isn't Lawson. You've got to check with that cunt an old man of mine having chucked his spunk around this tune like a lunatic spraying asylum was. What's it you did in there like? What line of work are you in? Another bitter wee shrug, and she pushes the wet trestles of hair out her eyes. I write plays, though the rest of the world seems to disagree. No felly down there. Somebody who'll be worried about you. Ha! She laughs so cynically. I'm fleeing an emotionally abusive relationship. I'm back in my home city with a specially commissioned play at the Traverse. It was supposed to be the return of the prodigal daughter, but the critics have not been kind and I've had enough. Does that answer your questions? Wait, so you're going to kill yourself out of felly in a play? You don't understand. Find another felly. Write another play if that yin was shite. I shot this prisoner of war scud flick once. They do like it up them. It wasn't that great, but it didn't deter. It wasn't shite, she goes, now all angry for the first time. You just don't get it. But I'm not surprised. All right, so the bird's going to be fish food in 20 minutes, but I'm not that struck in her patter, eh? Oh, aye, I see. I didn't understand because I drive a cab, is that it? Because I drive a taxi, I can't be expected to understand the complex mind of an artiste. I didn't say that. I've done a fair bit of acting, no stage, but screen, and I understand the process of you, Ken, I tell her. People think Scud's just about banging away, but as my mate Sick Boy says, we're telling a story here, so you've got to ken your lines and hit your mark. I'm not saying I'm fucking Brad Pitt, but then again, I'm not saying that cunt's Juice Terry. Last year, when we were shooting Dr. Scheme, a thorough examination, I had to stick one thermometer up this bird's fanny and another up her arse and say, the hottest hole is the one that gets his fat dick, baby. Sounds fucking straightforward enough, but it's not that easy when there's cameras on you, lights shining in your coupon, a boom mic overhead, and Sick Boy prancing about shouting orders at you. But she's off on one bit, eh? Oh, good, let them talk, the boy on the course says. All I ever wanted to do was write. She goes, 4 years of my life went into that play, and they didn't get it. They didn't get me. The sneering men I could understand, that cabal of sad old queens, but when the jealous so-called fucking sisters turned on me, she shakes her head, letting these wet locks fly. No, I've had enough. There's no lot you can say about that. I look in the mirror. She reminds me a bit of that bird for Liverpool that I made Anal Torpedo 3 with. That was when I played the captain on the whaling ship, crewed by birds, all wearing fishnet tights. Catchphrase, there she blows. She's gone all quiet as we're passing the Barnton roundabout, her hands clasped together on her lap. He'd bowed, staring at them. So I thinks, fuck it, I'll make a wee move. Listen, this might seem a wee bit cheeky, Sal, but can I ask you a wee favour? She looks up at us like I'm fucking tapped. What? You want a favour? From me? What favour can I do anyone now? Well, I was just wondering, and see if you're in any big hurry. I says, giving her a cheeky wee smile. Any chance of a ride before you jump? What? Her face sort of twists, then she's silent again. Suits me, she's not saying aye, but she's not saying no. I was just wondering, Sal, and I ken this is a wee bit cheeky, but the quiet bairn gets now, eh? Maybe just go out with a bang, last night on earth. I goes, tell you what, I'll give you a good fucking cowp, pardon my French. You want to have sex with me? Suicide Sal laughs, her voice going all high, like she can't believe what she's hearing. In fact, she's getting out of her coat and pulling off her jumper. She's sitting there in a black bra. Go ahead, pull up, do what the fuck you like. And I does that all right, heading off that slip road just before the bridge toll booth comes into view. The howling wind is that strong, I can barely move the door at first. But with a ride in the back, it could be turned on its side, buried in an avalanche, and I'd still be able to fucking well open it. Fasten your seatbelt, hen, I shouts to her, because we could be in for some offy, bumpy, rumpy, pumpy. Thanks for listening, folks. Cheers.
We can read more of Juice Terry in Suicide Sales Adventures next year.
Yeah.
For better or worse. Again, two fantastic, famous, extreme characters living on the edge, raging against the world, but carrying this dark, mordant humour. Does that come from inside you, or are you on a higher calling to sort of channel the voices of others?
No, I mean, it's like you kind of, I think everybody has a thing that they're interested in doing as a writer, and this is going to sound a bit grand and poncy, but my thematic concern is to kind of get to work out how people fuck up and the mechanisms by which we kind of mess up, and when things are going badly, you know, we compound the badness by making worse decisions. When things are going well, we get complacent, we just fuck up anyway. So it's always this kind of, that move towards failure is always kind of interesting me, because failure is much more interesting than success. Success is quite boring, you know. You get successful at something, you just become very complacent and a bit arrogant and full of yourself. But failure is a great educator because it just comes at you in so many different ways. So I've been fascinated by kind of how people fail and how we kind of, from a novelistic point of view or a storytelling point of view, when you put a character under intense pressure, or you put two kind of different characters in a situation whereby they're both in extreme situations, like Looney and Lisa, or like Lucy and Lisa and Lena, sorry, and like Terry and Sal in this kind of story, that two opposites put into this kind of weird scenario, and they kind of have to find some way of getting on, and they have to find some kind of way of coming together, and it usually ends up in disaster, but the trip can be quite fun.
Yeah. What's been your most glorious failure?
Just about everything I did in life before I started writing. So it's the one thing, I think when you're a writer, you're basically a serial failure at everything. And then you find one thing that you can do. And, you know, so this is kind of the one thing I haven't really failed at, or that I've kind of, the one thing that, you know, the one thing that I can do that I don't feel that I'm completely wasting my time with. Do
you feel as though you're a much better writer than you were in '93, or are you still trying to sort of rebottle the lightning that you had back when you weren't a writer and
Both.
you were trying to be one?
Both. I think you kind of, you know, the shock of the new is something that when you first emerge, you've got that kind of shock of the new. Nobody knows who you are, and if you do something that's quite incendiary, you get a tremendous impact and a tremendous lift. You know, in the first 2 or 3 books, you've probably still got you've got that kind of juice. Then after, I don't think you have that anymore. I think you learn other skills. You know, you technically you just get better at it the more you do it. But I think you kind of miss that sort of that shock of the new. I mean, people kind of do. In some ways, they know what to expect from a certain kind of writer now. You know, everybody knows what they kind of roughly what is going to be in the books. Like, you know, I mean, you try and surprise people, but you try and surprise yourself. But I think that once you have a kind of, I mean, I don't know how many books I've written now, but it seems to be too many. You know, I never kind of planned to write
8,
as many.
I think. Is that too many? What do we think, too many, or we're good for a couple more?
A couple more then, fair enough. You're just being coy there, and I know I wanted to tease it out of you, but but yeah, I mean, so I mean, I'll write them anyway, because as I said, I can't do anything else now. You know, I couldn't. Honestly, I wouldn't be able to clean out a kind of a public shithouse these days. I mean, I just don't have I'm totally useless at for anything other than writing.
But you can write about the public shithouses better than any other author in the world,
I can write about it being cleaned, you know, I can watch somebody clean it, you know, I can do all that, you know, that fascinates me, but to actually do it myself, to pick up tools, is going to be very difficult for me now.
Can I take you back to that first wild ride? So 93 the book comes out, 95 the film. when we first met up, you were telling me about drinking with Keith Richards, pashing Cameron Diaz, almost drowning in a swimming pool in Hollywood and being rescued by a vodka promotions girl.
Yes.
I mean, you obviously recall some of these dizzying moments, but when you look back, is it like sort of life in the eye of the hurricane?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you kind of, because of the way that, Trainspotting was became part of this whole Britpop explosion thing. It was a Britpop film, and it was also like, it was all, because Britpop was the last time, that the 90s was the sort of, it was basically the sale of British culture. And it was because, Britpop was a fusion of kind of sort of mod and sort of casual and acid house and punk and all these things that had gone before. So it was a great supermarket clearinghouse. It was like the requiem mass of British culture before it was served up to the internet and to the globalization. And we don't really have that now. We just have a media culture. So we have like Simon Cowell and all that instead of Tony Wilson and Factory. So that's how far we've kind of fallen from grace in the internet era, basically. So that was us kind of packaging everything off, and Trainspotting was became the film of that sort of era. So I was kind of treated in a strange way. I was treated more like a kind of pop star than a writer, and you kind of have to, you have to keep that. I think kind of fame isn't a kind of good thing for a writer. You have to kind of, you want to keep as anonymous as much as you can, but there's the other side of you saying like, look, get in there and fucking fill your boots because this will never happen again. Experience this, sort of, kind of, do everything that you should, that you should do in that position. Sort of explore every debauchery and decadence and vice. And I kind of did, and I kind of, I kind of did and I kind of didn't as well at the same time. I sort of, I dived into that kind of world for a bit. And then dived out, and then dived in, and then dived out. So I didn't always make the best decisions round about then, but I probably made better decisions than I would have if it happened to me 10 years younger. I would have been fucking dead if it happened to me 10 years younger. Yeah.
And I guess the luster of that fantasy was increased by so many of your books being turned into films, and seeing the characters that you'd invented in your head in a little studio apartment sort of suddenly become larger than life. What's it like, sort of seeing them take on this new lease of life up there on the big screen?
It was, it's so strange because the kind of, it's very emotional, the impact of seeing, something that you've written, either transferred to film or stage by actors is a very kind of, it's a very emotional thing. You think that it has a, because you see it as a book in some ways. I mean, no matter how much you're kind of visualizing what's going on, you're still seeing it as text. I mean, you see real people kind of performing these roles and kind of inhabiting, the actors, and the actors inhabiting the characters in a way that you don't, in a way that you don't really think is kind of possible, because you think this is my kind of book, I've written this, I'm writing these characters, and nobody else is going to get them in that kind of way. But they just do, they just become those characters, and it's such a weird experience, such a kind of very exciting, very kind of charged experience to see people do that.
Yeah, the fellow writing the pig on your T-shirt is James McAvoy from Filth, which came out last year. Did we all see Filth? Yeah. Tell us, I mean, you said McAvoy went to extreme lengths to get inside the character of Bruce Robinson. You said he was able to switch it off at the end of the night and come and have a quiet drink.
Yeah, it was amazing because he's playing this very intense character, and he was incredibly dedicated to the part, and we talked, him and myself and John Baird talked about the character, at length, and. He would drink half a bottle of whiskey every night, so he would wake up feeling that really seedy, horrific way. But he also just by sheer, just by the way he moved and the way he talked and the way he moved his face and his body language, he actually looked like a kind of 40-year-old sort of sleazy divorcee. And when I first met him, he looked about 10 years old, and he was able to. I left him for half an hour and came back, and he'd gone into character. And he just morphed into this 40-year-old divorcee. And that was without costume and makeup. He was just really, I thought, this guy's amazing and he's going to really knock this out the park. And he kind of, he did. Yeah.
Are you conscious when you're writing of the feeling you want to be eliciting out of the reader? Because a lot of the people who read your books are sort of doing it through, they can't believe what's about, they're almost afraid to turn the page as to what's going to happen next. Is that, are you deliberately pushing them? Are you challenging the reader?
You don't. I mean, I'm a selfish bastard when I write. I don't conceive of any reader that anybody's going to be reading this. You just think I'll just go off on one, and I think I like to let the subconscious do the heavy lifting as much as possible, and. Sometimes when you look back, you go, fuck, I've got to send this to somebody. People are going to read it. What's my mum going to say? You know, you go through, you do go through all that kind of thing, but...
what does your mum think of Sex Lives of Siamese Twins? Because there are some fairly graphic sex scenes in there.
Yeah, you know, she said to me, she says, look, it's well written, son, but there's too much lesbian sex in it. So I was
better than saying it's not enough, I guess.
Yeah, I was curious to know how much lesbian sex was enough. But, and then she says to me, like, you know, what do you know about lesbian sex anyway? I said, well, hopefully more than you, because I've written it. But you can't have a kind of sort of conversation with your 82-year-old mother and that, you know, about that kind of thing, and it be satisfactory in any way. So I always think the best thing to do is just not go there and just say, oh, I'm sorry you didn't like it, Mum. You know,
While we're on the subject of lesbian sex, you're script writing Spring Breakers 2, which James Franco tweeted he's not very happy about, but it's hedonism writ large. You know, tell us about that. You've got two screenplays on the go. Let's talk, because the other one is the sequel to Trainspotting, which you and John and Danny met on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, Spring Breakers 2 is like the guys who are the producers on, or one of the producers, Moose Films, Chris and Roberta Hanley, who've done a lot of really great films. They did The Virgin Suicides, Buffalo 66, American Psycho, Spun, which was Jonas Åkerlund's movie with Mickey Rourke. And Jonas and I are friends, and we've wanted to work together for a long time. And we got this. We were offered me to write, him to direct the sequel to Spring Breakers, and we kind of we thought this is kind of strange thing, you know. But you know, apparently, I mean, we were led to believe at the time. I don't know if this is true or not, but that the director, writer of Spring Breakers had turned it down, and he didn't want to do it. Didn't want anything to do with it. So we thought, well, we're stepping into something that's kind of clean, but. Now, I don't know what's kind of happened, whether or not whether that was the case or not, or whether he was just bumped off the project. I don't know. I mean, if it was the latter, we would both been a lot more reticent about getting involved in it. But I think that you know, for us, it was an opportunity to work together, and you know, a film that's already fully financed. So we just kind of went for it without realising there was all this baggage that, or presumably all this baggage to it. I don't even know if that's true.
I guess there's more baggage in returning to Trainspotting as well. How do you feel about that? How do you know, because you want to reunite the original cast as well, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it would work without the original cast. And I think that, you know, I know that Danny and John and Andrew and Christian feel the same. So we're trying to. We spent a week in Edinburgh, like kind of hired in a flat quite near, right in between the castle and the Camera Obscura, this little kind of weird courtyard that I never even knew existed. Beautiful little place, looks onto Princess Street Gardens, one, you know, in the castle on the other side. And we had a great time there, just the five of us, and we kind of, you know, the idea was to see if we could all work together after sort of kind of 20 years, basically. I think it's the only time we've been in the same room in the last 20 years. You know, we've all been in, you know, we've all done bits and pieces with each other over the years, but to have the four of us in that room was the first time for 20 years, and that was kind of, it was actually really good fun. It was really exciting, and it felt like kind of, and I don't, you know, it's difficult. You know, you don't quite trust it because you think, are we just vibing on a kind of pals get together, or are we actually sort of, are we excited by the material and the prospect of doing the film and all that, you know? So you have to kind of you have to guard yourself, because we set the bar really high for Trainspotting, and you know, we're looking at now and seeing if we can get a screenplay that that kind of sort of does justice to the first one, but does justice to the characters further on in their life. And I mean, it's still not convinced. I mean, if the answer is no, then we'll kind of walk. But if we can get something that feels really interesting and exciting, And it's a good film in a very different way, because it has to be. It's about middle-aged guys rather than a youth movie.
Yep.
So we'd have to look at it and see what we can come up with. And that's our challenge over the next few months now, is to look at how we can do something that's that kind of that's inspired by the book Porno, but you know, things have moved on since then too. You know, I mean, in the 50 Shades era, kind of internet kind of sort of sex and kind of, you know, sort of films of kind of, you know, sort of gonzo porn and all that is pretty much passé now. You know, it's pretty much, you know, so it wasn't when I wrote Porno. So we're just looking if we can find a way in and find a story that's going to sort of that's going to help us to get these characters kind of flying again.
It's time to hand over to you guys. So we've got microphones on either side of the aisle here. If anyone's got a question, please move to the wings there and fire it down the line. I asked Irvine the other day if he'd had a near-death experience, and he was able to peel off, was it 6 near-death experiences? Can you quickly reel off your dirty half dozen?
Oh, you mentioned one, the almost drowning in the pool, the vodka promotions model.
So that's one.
One was a kind of, there's actually 2 that are almost identical, which is fucking careless, really, when you think about it. One was a kind of acid house party in London where I kind of fell down this disused stairwell. And I did the same thing at this other one in Chicago, but it was my friend Bill Hillman grabbed a hold of me.
Yeah. So that's 3.
That's 3. There was a bus crash that I was in with my friend Sandy McNair, and the bus blew over and it toppled over, and we spent a couple of weeks in Perth Royal Infirmary. Yeah. One guy in the bus died in the top deck close to us. I think... I don't know, my mate Davy's in here, he'll probably be able to name another dozen or something like that.
There might be a couple more tonight, who knows?
Yeah.
Let's start over here.
Hopefully near-death experiences.
Yeah, of course. Although the value of your books will...
Yeah, I know.
Irvine, I'm interested in the psychology of Lena and Lucy's recovery, and I'm interested where that idea of psychology and recovery came from. They both start off in a pretty desperate place, and it seems to me that your idea is through connection and love, through discipline and, of course, sex, both of them move from a place of being stuck to a new way of life. I haven't read Trainspotting, but I was wondering if you could explain your ideas about how people shift from being really stuck.
Well, the way I saw it with those characters is that they both had a kind of trauma that they've had. You know, one was about being sexually abused. The other one was about the reaction to the suicide of her only close friend and being bullied. And I felt that, you know, they both kind of, went to sort of, to different kind of means of dealing with that trauma. One did it through being very aggressive and being very in control. And the other one did it through kind of, you know, was a bit more drippy and artsy, but did it through food and through comfort and kind of the self-abuse of extreme kind of overeating. And I felt that in some ways they kind of helped each, you know, they would heal each other and make each other a complete person, you know, so their coming together was about them trying to kind of being repelled by the other one in some ways, but being fascinated by the other one too, because they knew that they had something, the other one had something that they could help them. And the idea is that they both become a bit more sort of balanced, you know, you know, that's what happens in relationships, really, isn't it? You know, you kind of, you can take, you know, you model some of the good behaviour and the more interesting and sort of helpful parts from the other person that you're with. And sometimes it can be a transitory thing. You don't know if that relationship or their relationship would last, but you know that they're going to give each other something lasting from it.
Thanks for your question. Over here.
I recently read Filth, and I made the mistake of reading it in public. So at the end, I kind of read it and had a physical reaction to it and thought, did anyone else know that I just read that? But I was wondering where the idea came from to make a tapeworm an actual character in your book.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got interested in sort of, I mean, I read somewhere that, you know, you can get a tapeworm that's 40 foot that lives in your intestine. I think, God, how can you have something that's another kind of living creature growing inside you and, you know, wrapped around your intestines and you don't even know about it? That was kind of creepy and weird to me. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if the tapeworm was a sentient being, but also more in some ways more interesting and more sensitive than the host. You know, the idea that the parasite is kind of more interested than the host. And I realise that it kind of, obviously it's not a kind of real tapeworm at all. It's basically his conscience that he's kind of imbued, you know, because he's obsessed with the idea that he's got this worm. And it's his conscience, and the worm is kind of it's basically his conscience speaking. You know, that he should be kind of, and it's it's written in that kind of second person sort of thing, which is a very effective way of writing the kind of divided, dislocated character. You know, when they start talking about you did this and you did that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for your question.
Hey, Irvine, man, you're a rock star. Your work can be classified as unique, to say the very least. Can you give any sort of advice to aspiring authors that are kind of struggling to find a market as compared to the kind of generic memoirs and other such rubbish that's kind of overflowing the market?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult now. It's difficult for new writers who want to do something that's interesting, because the writing world has become a lot more conservative. The publishing world has become a lot more conservative. I mean, I really don't think that Trainspotting would be published now. I just think that I can't see any of the main publishers would ever have taken it on. So I'd have probably self-published now, to be honest, and try to find some kind of audience through social network, or putting bits of it out as samples, because. It's like now, I mean, it's like the way things are kind of set up from booksellers and publishers, that everything is kind of written into marketing holes, and it's there's a preponderance of as you say, genre stuff and memoir and sort of it's like you go in, there's a science fiction section, you think, and the idea is to build up a franchise now of characters. So you get this guy who. He goes to different planets in every book, and fights different aliens, and you get the crime guy who solves different cases in one town or one city, and who gives you a kind of false resolution so that suburbanites can sleep easy in bed and all that. They can have the visceral thrill of the killer, but they know he's going to be put away by the detective or whatever. And you've got the kind of, probably the most reaction to a lot would be the romance, where where you know that the heroine is going to sort of, she's eventually going to tame and marry the cad who's kind of abused her through the first kind of sort of, 200 pages of the book, So there's all these kind of weird, sort of this weird stuff going on, and you're expected. I think writers now. I mean, I've known a lot of younger writers who have said, like, well, we've done a book and people have liked it, they've published it. And I said, right, now do a crime, or now do a thriller.
Yeah.
So they've been pushed into this kind of place by publishers in a way they weren't when I started. You did have a lot of freedom to write what you wanted to write. And the other thing is, as well, now there's the kind of horrible sort of influence of the kind of the writers' program. The kind of the MFA or the BFA program. And I'm not knocking. I mean, I've taught in these courses myself, so I'm not knocking them. As a sort of, well, I kind of am really, I suppose. But I think that they do produce a kind of house style. They produce a homogenized house style, and in some ways, that's what we want now. We have become very conservative as consumers. Most people do want something that's like something that they've already had before.
Thanks for your question. One more over here.
Hi. First, thank you so much for coming out. It's awesome. So much, or a big theme in a lot of your work is cycles of alcohol and violence and how they sort of intertwine. And that's been sort of a hot topic in this country pretty recently in the media. And I went to my first bush doof pretty recently. And I was wondering what you sort of think of that underground dance drug culture as an alternative to, paying for overpriced drinks and encountering casual thuggery.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for underground dance culture, because you kind of, I think I'm all for the kind of do-it-yourself culture in general. I think that the best fun is had when people are kind of they're going out and they're producing music and they're playing music for their friends and they're having a party. And it's very difficult to do that now. It's easier to do it in Australia because you've got all the space. You can just fuck off into the Blue Mountains or something like that with a sound system, and nobody's going to bother you there. But you do it in Britain. I mean, you kind of basically a lot of people that put on big parties in Britain, kind of some of them ended up here actually, but a lot of people got run out of Britain basically on through the criminal justice bill onwards. And what you have now is a homogenised, horrible kind of nightmare velvet rope kind of sort of super club, and it's like it's just not a lot of fun. It's about just fleecing kind of money out your pockets and sort of making you into this kind of consumer. So yeah, I mean, and they've become like dance clubs have become like places to be seen, which it was never really about at all. It was the last place you wanted to be. You wanted to be seen. You wanted to have fun. You wanted to engage and get into it. So yeah, so I think that the underground party scene is one of the greatest, most healthiest things that you can have. That a bunch of that basically that youth can have in any kind of society.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi, I just finished reading Last Exit to Brooklyn, prefaced by your good self, and I just wondered what that was like as a meeting of two great authors, and if you draw inspiration from Hubert or any other authors.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I did. I mean, I always loved the power of that book when I first read it, and they asked me to write a foreword for it, which I was kind of delighted to do. I never actually got to meet Hubert Selby, but I kind of did have a long conversation with him on the phone for about 2 or 3 hours before he, it was quite, not that long before he died, and he was an incredible guy, and he kind of, the interesting thing about him is, he's kind of known for The Last Exit to Brooklyn, but he wrote some really kind of out there, kind of harrowing fiction. Like The Room is an incredibly kind of disturbing novel. But it was, to me, it's one of these great iconic novels of American literature. And what tends to happen with books like that in America is that they become like, Allgren's Man with the Golden Arm and all that. They become big kind of sort of cultural events, and then they're marginalised and pushed out, and you've got the kind of the more kind of sort of Pulitzer Prize-y New Yorker type of sort of novel. It's almost like the white old guy, rich guy's novel is almost like the default setting, basically. And it happens in the UK as well, unfortunately. So it's like I'm always trying to kind of sort of champion kind of great books like that as much as I can.
Thanks for your question. We've got time for a couple more.
First of all, thanks for writing your books. They've really helped with my homesickness for Scotland, so cheers to that. This isn't about your books, this question, but I wondered if you could maybe answer or give me your opinion. I wondered what your thoughts are about the election in September in Scotland. You don't need to answer. But.
Yeah, no, I've kind of been pro-Scottish independence. I think it's like, I think we need to grow the fuck up, basically, as a country, and I don't think we're going to do that if we're continually in the position where we can blame England for everything that goes wrong. I think we do have to take control of our own affairs, and it's long overdue. I don't know how the referendum is going to play out. I think it could go either way. It's very, very volatile. But I think whatever happens, whether it's a kind of yes or no vote, I think the long-term path that we're on is towards independence. Basically, because I don't really see anything holding the UK together these days. I don't really, everything that was holding the UK together, like, the industry and empire were the kind of bulwarks of it, and then there was the esprit de corps of 2 world wars, and then, the welfare state and all that. All these things have gone now, so I feel that there's been a much, as well as kind of Scottish and, the move for Scottish independence, I feel that there's been a much more kind of robust growth of English nationalism, which has manifested itself in a lot of different areas. And I feel now it's kind of Britain's increasingly becoming that kind of party that you're not really invited to if you're Scottish, and I think that, and I feel now that you've got the kind of, in Scotland, there is a kind of mechanism whereby with the Parliament that, people in Scotland can take as much or as little powers as they want, and I think that they are slowly kind of starting to kind of feel that confidence. And it is interesting because it's like quite, I kind of, the last time I was back there I was really shocked because Scots are really, really nice to strangers. They're really hospitable to strangers who come into the country, but they're fucking very hard on each other, you know? Very, very nasty to each other we can be as a nation. And then the last few times I've been back, everybody's nice to each other, and I think, what the fuck is going on here? Like, this is terrible for me because there's nothing to write about, you know. So, but it's been very interesting watching a kind of nation sort of growing up and reinventing itself almost from the inside.
Yeah. I've been told to wind it up. I'm going to just sneak one more question in, and then Irvine's going to do a signing in the foyer. So if you've got books or you want to buy them, but just one more fast question.
Well, that was my question about Scottish independence, but I've got a very quick one for you then. Where are you going to watch the game tonight? And I'll come and buy you a beer.
Right.
Watch out.
Yeah, it'll be in Melbourne because I'm off to Melbourne at 6 o'clock. So hopefully, I mean, I think it's midnight tonight, kickoff time, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to get to. I want to get to a bar in Melbourne that's going to show it. So anybody who knows of a bar in Melbourne that will show the Hibs game, otherwise I'll just watch it on the laptop in my hotel room. I'll be too nervous. I'll at least have the minibar in the hotel. I'll be able to just sit there. Like,
Why don't you invite him back to the hotel?
you can come to Melbourne if you like me,
Yeah. All right, that's all we got time for. Like I said, Irvine's going to be in the foyer, but will you please thank our very special guest?
Thank you. This guy here.